Hannah, I can't keep living like this. Mark's voice shattered the stillness of our living room. His eyes blazed with frustration and something bordering on guilt. I deserve happiness, too, and it's not with you anymore. I stood frozen, the words slicing through me like a knife. Our son, Ethan, was in his room, likely engrossed in some video game, oblivious to the low-key disaster unfolding here. I crossed my arms protectively over my chest. Mark, what are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about, he snapped, pacing back and forth. I can't breathe in this house. Every day feels like a weight pressing down on me. Is there someone else? The question slipped out before I could stop it. I needed to know if my growing suspicion had a basis in fact, but seeing the hesitation in his eyes, I feared the answer. How could you ask me that? He deflected, glaring at the floor. You always think the worst of me. Maybe I am better off without you constantly judging me. At that moment, Ethan's footsteps echoed down the stairs. Mark and I fell silent, our heated conversation interrupted. Ethan hesitated for a moment before walking into the kitchen, pretending not to notice the tension. Mark took the opportunity to grab his car keys. I need some air, he muttered, brushing past Ethan. The door slammed behind him, leaving a thick silence in its wake. Ethan walked over, concern etched on his young face. Mom, are you okay? I forced a smile. I'm fine, sweetie. Just a little grown-up talk. He eyed me skeptically, but didn't push further. Do you need any help with dinner? No, I've got it. You go ahead and finish your game. As he walked away, I leaned against the counter, my head spinning. Mark's words echoed in my mind, mingled with the nagging suspicions that had been surfacing over the past few months. His erratic work hours, the sudden interest in picking Ethan up from school, things he never cared about before. Something wasn't right. The next day, I sat at my desk, trying to focus on a project when my phone buzzed. It was Lisa, my best friend. I hesitated, but then answered, needing her comforting voice. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Hannah, how've you been? Her cheerful tone quickly shifted. You sound off. What's going on? I sighed deeply, recounting the argument with Mark. It's getting worse. I think he's cheating on me. You're kidding, Lisa exclaimed. That jerk, what are you going to do? I don't know. I don't have any concrete proof. Do you want me to come over? Maybe we can figure something out together. Before I could answer, my client Michelle called on the other line. Can we talk later? Michelle's on the other line. Sure, but Hannah, don't just sit on this. You and Ethan deserve better. I know, thanks, I said, switching calls with a heavy heart. Hey, Michelle. Hi, Hannah. I sense some tension, Michelle noted immediately. Is everything okay? Pausing, I decided to keep it vague. Just some personal issues. How can I help you today? Well, I noticed some errors on the recent draft you sent. I thought maybe you're distracted. Is there anything I can do? No, I'll get it fixed. Thanks for understanding. The call ended and I slumped back in my chair, overwhelmed. If Mark was truly unfaithful, it could destroy everything I'd worked to build. Yet, action over despair. I grabbed my phone and started dialing a private investigator, hoping to uncover the truth. That evening, I watched Ethan quietly reading a book in the corner. His presence was a grounding force, reminding me that no matter what, I had to protect him. As Mark walked through the door, his eyes hardly met mine. Dinner's almost ready, I said. Fine, he replied curtly, sinking into the couch. My resolve hardened. I would find out what he was hiding, and I would do whatever it took to ensure our family's survival or rebirth. Days had passed since the argument with Mark, and the tension between us thickened like a fog. Every evening he came home later than the one before, offering weak excuses about overtime or traffic. Meanwhile, I had arranged for the private investigator to start following Mark. Each phone call from the investigator left my heart pounding. One afternoon, I was working on a design project when I noticed the time. Mark had offered to pick Ethan up from school again. That an offer he'd made several times this week. Something about it felt off. I grabbed my keys and decided to head to the school myself. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw Mark standing outside the school, chatting with Lucy, the school administrator. They were laughing, standing uncomfortably close. My stomach twisted. I quickly parked the car and stepped out, trying to get a closer look without being seen. Mark reached out to brush a strand of hair from Lucy's face. She smiled, placing her hand on his arm. My pulse quickened. I fought the urge to confront them then and there, choosing instead to hang back and observe. Ethan finally emerged from the school, and Mark's demeanor shifted instantly. He pulled away from Lucy and waved to Ethan. I stayed out of sight until they both drove off in Mark's car. As the dust settled, Lucy walked back inside without noticing me. That evening, I met Lisa for coffee. I needed to share what I had seen. I saw them, Lisa. Mark and Lucy acting way too friendly, I said, my voice trembling. He's definitely cheating. Lisa took a sip of her coffee, her eyes dark with anger. What a piece of work. You need to confront him with hard evidence. He shouldn't get away with this. I'm working on it. I hired a private investigator, I confessed, lowering my voice. Good. Gather everything you can. Once you have proof, you'll be able to take action. Feeling somewhat reassured, I headed home. Later that night, as we sat down to dinner, Mark's phone buzzed. He glanced at it quickly and then placed it face down on the table. I couldn't resist. Who's that? I asked casually. Just work stuff, he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. Really? I pressed. Work texts you this late? He sighed, irritation rising. You know how it is, Hannah. Sometimes they need me at odd hours. Ethan looked between us, sensing the undercurrents but staying silent. I had to change the subject, unwilling to drag him into the ugliness, at least not yet. Fine, I said, forcing a calm tone. The next day, Michelle noticed my exhaustion. Hannah, you seem tired lately. Everything okay? I hesitated, then decided to confide a bit. Just some personal issues, Michelle. I'm handling it. If you need time off, just let me know, she offered kindly. Thanks. I appreciate it. In the evening, the private investigator called. Hannah, I have some photos and receipts that you might find interesting. He's been meeting Lucy frequently. It's more than just a fling. My hands trembled. Can you email them to me? Sure. You'll have them shortly. As I clicked through the files he sent, each image drove another nail into the coffin of my marriage. There were receipts for expensive dinners and jewelry, all taken from our joint account. The account that should have been for Ethan's college fund. Determined, I started transferring the remaining money into a new account in my name. If Mark wanted to play dirty, so could I. As I secured the last of our savings, I looked at Ethan, who was focused on his homework. For him, I would stand strong. For him, I would fight back. This war wasn't going to end without a battle. The weekend brought a school event that Ethan had been looking forward to for weeks. Despite everything, I couldn't let our personal issues overshadow his excitement. We arrived at the school gymnasium in the early afternoon, the noise of parents and kids echoing through the space. Ethan ran off to join his friends, leaving me to find a spot near the back. I spotted Mark almost immediately, standing not too far away with Lucy. They were too close, locked in an intimate conversation that stirred a pit of anger within me. As I approached, I could hear their laughter. Mark looked up and spotted me, his smile fading instantly. Lucy turned and saw me too, her face quickly masking any hint of familiarity. Hey, Hannah, Mark said, his tone forced. Glad you could make it. Of course, I replied coldly, my eyes fixed on him. Wouldn't miss it. Lucy cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable. I should get back, she murmured, slipping away. I turned to Mark, my voice low and steady. You think I'm stupid, don't you? What are you talking about? He asked, irritation growing in his eyes. I saw the photos, the dinners, the gifts. You've been lying to me and stealing from us. He narrowed his eyes, realizing he couldn't deflect this time. I don't know what you're talking about. Drop the act, Mark, you're caught. For a moment, he seemed to crumble. Then his expression hardened. Fine. What do you want from me? The truth would be a start, I shot back. I haven't been happy for a long time, Hannah. You want the truth? There it is. And Lucy? Does she make you happy? He didn't answer, his silence confirming everything. I felt a heavy weight settle in my chest, but I stood my ground. From now on, I'll be handling the finances, and if you think of touching our savings again, you'll regret it. Mark scoffed. Whatever, do what you want. We stood in awkward silence until Ethan approached, eyes bright with excitement. Mom, Dad, did you see my shot? Mark immediately shifted gears, plastering a smile on his face. We saw, buddy. Great job. I forced a smile, ruffling Ethan's hair. You were amazing, Ethan. As the event wound down, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Lisa, her face showing concern. Can we talk? We stepped outside, the cool air a welcome relief. What's going on, Hannah? You look upset. I confronted Mark. He didn't deny it. Lisa sighed, shaking her head. That jerk. What's your next move? I've been putting money aside. I need to think about what's best for Ethan. That's smart. And remember, you're not alone in this. Whatever you need, I'm here. Before I could respond, Ethan ran up, his excitement undimmed. Are we going home now? Yeah, Ethan, let's go home, I said, wrapping an arm around him. That night, as Ethan slept, I sat at the dining table, sorting through the evidence the investigator had collected. Each piece was another betrayal, another lie. When Mark finally came home, I confronted him again. You need to leave. Tonight. He looked at me, a mix of anger and resignation. Where do you expect me to go? I don't care. You've made your choices. Now live with them. Without another word, he grabbed a bag and started stuffing clothes into it. As he walked out the door, he paused. You'll regret this, Hannah. Maybe, I replied, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve it. The door closed behind him, leaving the house in a heavy silence. I locked the door, walking back to Ethan's room to check on him. Watching him sleep, I knew I'd made the right decision. Mark was gone, and from now on, I would do whatever it took to protect my son and myself. The road ahead would be tough, but I was ready. This was just the beginning. After Mark left, a strange calm settled over the house. It didn't last long. The next morning, Ethan sensed something was off. Where's Dad? He asked over breakfast, his eyes searching mine for answers. He had to leave for a bit, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's just us for now. Ethan nodded slowly, processing the information. Okay, he said, though skepticism lingered in his eyes. I knew he deserved more, but I wasn't ready to shatter his world entirely. Later in the day, I received a call from the private investigator. Hannah, I've found more evidence. Bank statements, travel receipts. He's been siphoning money for months. My grip tightened around my phone. Email everything to me. I want to see it all. As I opened the documents, a sense of betrayal crashed over me. Savings meant for Ethan's future were squandered on luxury hotels and expensive dinners. This wasn't just infidelity, it was theft. I called Lisa, needing her unwavering support. Lisa, I've got proof he's been stealing from us. That's it, she said, her voice fierce. You need to see a lawyer. Already on it, I replied, determined. I'm meeting one tomorrow. The next morning, I met with a family lawyer. She listened intently, her expression growing more serious as I laid out the evidence. This is more than enough to file for divorce on grounds of infidelity and financial abuse, she said. You and Ethan will be better off without him, and you can secure full custody. Do it, I said, feeling a weight lift slightly. Back home, I faced Mark's deflection. He called, angry and defensive. Really, Hannah? You're going to drag lawyers into this? You did this to yourself, Mark, I snapped. You chose to betray us. You're being ridiculous, he tried to argue. You're blowing it all out of proportion. I could hear the desperation creeping into his voice, but I didn't waver. I'm protecting my son and myself. You're no longer part of that equation. The next day at school, I saw Lucy again. She was talking to another parent, her smile bright and charming. As I walked past, she glanced my way, her smile faltering. Hello, Hannah, she said, feigning warmth. How are you? I'm fine, Lucy, I replied coldly. I hope you're enjoying your time with Mark. It won't last. Her eyes widened, but she quickly composed herself. I don't know what you're talking about. Save it. Your involvement with a married man is going to cost you more than you think, I warned before walking away, leaving her standing there, stunned. That evening, Ethan mentioned Lucy. Mom, why does Miss Lucy always try to talk to me at school events? It's weird. I paused, taking a breath. She's just trying to be friendly, honey, but you don't have to talk to her if you don't want to. Ethan nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. He then hugged me tightly. I love you. Mom, we're going to be okay, right? Yes, Ethan, I whispered, hugging him back. We're going to be just fine. As Ethan went off to bed, I sat down, going through the legal paperwork. Each signature felt like a step towards reclaiming my life. This wasn't just about punishment, it was about starting fresh and securing a stable future for Ethan and me. Mark called again, his tone pleading this time. Hannah, can we talk? Just please, let's try to work this out. There's nothing more to discuss, I said firmly. You made your choices, and now we're moving on. Goodbye, Mark. With each step, each decision, I felt a new strength. The battle was far from over, but I was ready, and I would fight with everything I had to protect my family. Ethan had grown more withdrawn since the whole ordeal started. At first, I thought he was just reacting to the tension between Mark and me. One evening, he came into the kitchen while I was making dinner. "Mom, do you need any help?" he asked quietly. I looked up, surprised. "Sure, honey. Can you stir the sauce?" He approached cautiously, taking the spoon from me. We worked side by side in silence, the only sound being the occasional clinking of the spoon against the pot. After a while, he finally spoke up. "Will Dad ever come back?" I paused, taking a deep breath. "No, Ethan, I'm sorry. This is better for us." He nodded, eyes fixed on the sauce. I figured, it's just strange. "I know," I said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder, "but we'll get through this, together." A few days later, I had a meeting with my lawyer. She assured me that the divorce proceedings were moving smoothly. As I walked out of her office, my phone buzzed. It was Lisa. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I'm managing. Ethan's taking it hard, though." "He's a strong kid. He gets that from you," Lisa reassured me. "Listen, I heard Lucy got in trouble at work. Something about inappropriate conduct?" My interest piqued. "Really? What happened?" "Apparently, she's been a bit too friendly with the families. Crossed some lines. She's on thin ice." "Good," I said. "She deserves it." That Friday, Ethan and I were at his school for another event. I noticed Mark's car in the parking lot. Anxiety bubbled up inside me. As we walked in, I saw Mark near the entrance. His eyes searched the crowd until they landed on us. "Can we talk?" he asked, stepping closer. I shook my head. "Not here, Mark. Not now. Please, Hannah. It's about Ethan." I hesitated, then nodded. We found a quiet corner. Ethan wandered off to join his friends. "I've been thinking," Mark began. "I've made mistakes. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I want to be part of Ethan's life." "You had your chance, Mark. You blew it." "I know, but he's still my son. Can we at least work out some visitation?" "I'll think about it," I said, my voice cold. "But I'm not making any promises." We rejoined the event, the unspoken tension hanging heavy in the air. Later, as we drove home, Ethan broke the silence. "Why was Dad there?" "He wanted to talk," I said, keeping my voice even. "It's complicated, Ethan." He nodded, looking out the window. "I miss him, but I'm also mad at him." "That's okay," I said gently. "It's okay to feel both." The next morning, as I sipped my coffee, Ethan came and sat beside me. "Mom, I want to help more around the house." His sudden maturity tugged at my heart. "Thank you, Ethan. That means a lot." Together, we cleaned the house, a quiet bonding moment that brought a small sense of normalcy. Just as we finished, my phone buzzed with a message from my lawyer, an update on the proceedings. "Almost there," I murmured to myself. Over the next few days, Ethan continued to show surprising strength. He handled chores, focused on his schoolwork, and even offered me comforting words when I seemed stressed. His silent support was a beacon of hope. Then, one evening, he said something that broke my heart and healed it at the same time. "Mom, no matter what happens, we'll be okay, right?" I hugged him tightly. "Yes, Ethan, we'll be more than okay." In that embrace, I found the resolve to push through. For Ethan and myself, I would see this through to the end. No more lies, no more betrayal. Just a path forward, one step at a time. Mark walked into the house like it was any other day. He had a smug look on his face, as if he was still in control. Ethan and I were halfway through packing our belongings, boxes and bags strewn all around us. "What's going on here?" Mark asked, his eyes darting around, confusion quickly turning to anger. "What are you doing?" "We're leaving, Mark," I said calmly. "Ethan and I have had enough." His face twisted in rage. "You're taking my son away from me? You can't do this." "I can and I will," I said with steel in my voice. "You've left us no choice." Ethan walked in at that moment, dragging a suitcase behind him. He paused, noticing Mark's expression. "Dad," he started, but Mark cut him off. "You think this is the answer, Hannah? Running away? What about Ethan?" "It's about protecting him," I retorted, moving to place myself between them. "Something you clearly don't understand." Mark's phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it, and his face flushed with an odd mix of guilt and relief. "I have to go," he muttered, grabbing his keys. "Of course you do," I replied, my tone icy. As the door closed behind him, Lisa arrived with a few friends to help us move. "Everything okay?" she asked, glancing at the still swinging door. "It is now," I said, lifting another box. By evening, we had moved most of our things into a new apartment on the other side of town. Ethan helped set up his room, his resilience shining through even as exhaustion tugged at his eyes. "You did great today," I told him as we settled in for the first night in our new place. "Thanks, Mom. It feels different, but good different," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. The next day, I met with our lawyer to finalize the divorce proceedings. She laid out the paperwork, each signed document representing a step further away from the chaos Mark had brought into our lives. "We're almost there," she reassured me. "Just a little more patience." As I left the office, my phone buzzed with a message from Lisa. "Meet me at the school. Urgent." My heart raced as I headed over, dread and curiosity intertwining. When I arrived, I found Lisa and a few other parents standing near the entrance, their faces pale and tense. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It's Lucy," Lisa said. "There's a parent-teacher meeting right now, and things are about to get messy." We made our way to the meeting. As we entered, the room fell silent. There stood Mark, his face a mask of arrogance, standing next to Lucy, who looked equally smug. "Everyone, I have something to say," I declared, my voice cutting through the tension. I laid out the photographic evidence, the bank statements, and travel receipts. Gasps filled the room. "You've not only betrayed your family, Mark, but you've stolen from us too," I said, my voice steady. "And Lucy, your actions here are unacceptable." Ethan stepped forward, his voice strong and clear. "Dad's been causing a lot of trouble. Miss Lucy, too. It's been really hard on us." His words hit hard. The room erupted in whispers and nods of agreement. The principal stood up, looking stern. "Lucy, we need to discuss your conduct immediately." Mark fumed, his face turning red. "You can't do this." "Watch me, Mark," I replied, feeling a surge of resolve. The meeting ended in chaos. Lucy was escorted out, her face a mixture of shock and anger. Mark stormed off, defeated for now. I turned to Ethan, who stood tall and proud. "You were amazing," I told him. "We're going to be okay." For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. Yes, there was still a long road ahead, but we had taken the first crucial steps together, and for the first time, the future seemed bright. The fallout from the parent-teacher meeting sent ripples through our community. Lucy was placed on immediate leave, pending further investigation. Mark's life was rapidly unraveling, and he wasn't handling it well. A few days after the meeting, Mark showed up at our new apartment. He pounded on the door, his shouts echoing through the hallway. Ethan and I were in the kitchen, and I quickly moved to the door, gesturing for Ethan to stay back. "You can't just show up like this," I snapped, opening the door a crack. "Let me in, Hannah," he demanded, his eyes wild. "We need to talk." "There's nothing left to discuss," I replied firmly, my hand gripping the door. "Please, Hannah," he said, his voice breaking. "Just hear me out." I hesitated, but then closed the door firmly. "Not here. Meet me at the park in an hour. Alone." Later at the park, I found a bench under a large oak tree and waited. Mark arrived, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. As he got closer, I saw that desperation had replaced his usual arrogance. "Thank you for meeting me," he started, sitting down across from me. "Make it quick, Mark. What do you want?" "I'm sorry, Hannah. I really am," he said, his voice strained. "I messed up big time." "Yes, you did," I agreed, keeping my tone cold. "And now you have to live with those choices." "I want to make things right," he pleaded, "for Ethan's sake." "And how do you propose to do that?" I asked, arms crossed. "I'll get help. I'll find a job, a stable one this time. I want to be there for Ethan." I looked at him, my anger simmering just below the surface. "You should have thought about that before you betrayed us." "I know," he said, his voice faltering. "Please, just give me a chance. One chance to prove I can change." I stayed silent, weighing his words. After a moment I spoke. "I'll allow supervised visits, but if you mess up, there will be no more chances." Mark's face showed a glimmer of hope. "Thank you, Hannah. I swear I won't let you down." "We'll see," I said, standing up. "Don't expect forgiveness overnight." As I walked away, my phone buzzed. It was an email from my lawyer confirming the final steps of the divorce. Relief washed over me. This chapter of my life was finally closing. The next week at school, Ethan and I were attending a parent-teacher conference when the principal approached us. "Hannah, a moment, please," she said, pulling me aside. "Lucy has been terminated. Her actions were unacceptable, and we've taken strong measures to ensure this doesn't happen again." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely relieved. "I appreciate everything you've done." Ethan approached us, picking up on the conversation. Does that mean Miss Lucy is gone for good? Yes, Ethan, I said, smiling down at him. She won't be bothering us anymore. As we walked to the car, Ethan looked up at me. I think things are going to get better now. I think so too, I said, feeling a newfound sense of optimism. A few days later, Ethan and I were at home when Mark arrived for his first supervised visit. Lisa had agreed to be there as well, making sure everything went smoothly. Mark entered the room, looking nervous. Hi, Ethan, he said softly. Hi, Dad, Ethan replied, his voice tentative. They sat on the couch, talking and playing a game of cards. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Ethan needed his father, even if Mark wasn't the best role model. Supervised visits were the best compromise I could offer. As the visit ended, Mark stood up, looking at me. Thank you, Hannah. Really. I nodded, not ready for forgiveness, but willing to take small steps. Just remember, Mark, this is for Ethan. That night, as Ethan and I sat together, I felt a sense of closure. We had weathered the storm, and although the journey wasn't over, we were stronger together. The future seemed brighter, and for the first time, I believed we could truly move on. With each passing day, we were healing, and for that, I was grateful. The final divorce papers arrived at our new apartment on a crisp Friday morning. I opened the envelope, my hands trembling slightly, and quickly signed where needed. With a single stroke of the pen, my marriage to Mark was officially over. Relief washed over me, mingled with the heavy realization of starting anew. That same day, Michelle called with an exciting proposition. Hannah, your work has been exceptional. I'd like to offer you a full-time position at the design firm. Are you serious? I asked, barely containing my excitement. I don't know what to say. Thank you. You've earned it, Hannah. We can discuss the details on Monday. I hung up, a smile spreading across my face. This was the fresh start we needed. I turned to Ethan, who was reading at the kitchen table. Guess what, buddy? I got a new job. Ethan looked up, grinning. That's awesome, Mom. Later that afternoon, Mark arrived for another supervised visit with Ethan. He seemed calmer this time, the edges of his anger dulled by resignation. Lisa was there as usual, ensuring everything stayed on track. Hey, Ethan, Mark greeted, sitting down on the couch. Hi, Dad, Ethan replied, his voice lightening a bit. They started playing a board game, their laughter softening the lingering tension. Lisa leaned over to me. How are you holding up? Better, I admitted. I got a full-time job at Michelle's firm. That's fantastic. Things are really turning around, Lisa said, her face lighting up. When Mark's visit ended, he turned to me. Thank you, Hannah. I know I've said it before, but I mean it. Just keep proving it, I said, maintaining a neutral tone. For Ethan. That night, as Ethan and I prepared dinner together, the reality of our new beginning settled in. We were rebuilding, one day at a time. A few weeks later, I started my first full day at the design firm. Michelle introduced me to the team, making me feel welcome and valued. Everyone, this is Hannah. She's joining us full-time and I know she'll be a great asset, Michelle announced. The team members smiled and nodded, welcoming me warmly. As I settled into my new workspace, I felt a surge of confidence. This was my chance to create a stable, fulfilling life for Ethan and myself. Back home, Ethan flourished in our new environment. He was more engaged in school and even joined a local soccer team. His resilience was inspiring. One evening, as we were talking about his day, Ethan looked at me seriously. Mom, are we really going to be okay? Yes, Ethan. I assured him, my voice steady. We're stronger now, and we have each other. That's all we need. The months that followed were filled with small victories and moments of pure joy. Ethan and I had settled into a new rhythm, one that was free from the shadows of the past. We had created our sanctuary, a home filled with laughter and love. One day, Mark called. Hannah, I just wanted to check in. How's Ethan doing? He's doing well, I said, surprised by the genuine concern in his voice. He's strong, just like his mom. I'm glad. I'm trying to sort myself out, too, he admitted. I know it'll take time, but I'm working on it. That's good to hear, Mark, I said. For Ethan's sake, I hope you find your way. Closing the call, I felt a sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy, but we had come so far. Ethan and I had found our footing, and the future looked bright. As we sat down to dinner, Ethan looked up at me with a smile that reached his eyes. Mom, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us, I corrected, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. We did this together. In that moment, I knew we had truly conquered the darkness. Our lives were once more filled with hope and promise, and nothing could take that away from us.